The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
Mega good. And, you know, I grappled with that one as like a cheesy opening because it's not good. But when we recorded last time, because we're doing like a bunch of recordings back to back because of travel and stuff. And the last time we recorded, like everything was on fire. People were dying. Just the whole world was terrible. So things actually are mega good compared to that. So I'm okay with it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that sounds mega good, man.
Aha! Teamwork.
Yeah, we did. Dude, my son actually said to me the other day, he said, teamwork makes the dream work. And I said, where did you hear that? Megan goes, you.
Like, you just look down and you're just wearing a tweed suit with a tie and you're like, ah.
Oh God, what has happened to me? But yeah, what video game did we play?
We played Mega Man 2, which I'm going to do the little, top of the thing about the game itself, and then I'm going to roll right into my nostalgia experience because it's relevant to this particular game we picked. So this came out in 1988, just like, way back, right? Which I think is telling that the series is somehow sort of still running, kind of, but not as much as people would like. There's an original Nintendo game. There was also a Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy that is like similar but different. They like the early Game Boy or the early Mega Man games got like weird multi-platform releases. I think one of them even found its way onto the Sega Genesis, which is bizarre. There was a DOS release. This is the actual good one, the one on the Nintendo. Like your brain wants it to be.
Yeah.
If somehow you've never played a Mega Man game and haven't listened to our other Mega Man episodes, just Jump and Shoot Man 2. It's an action puzzle platformer made up of linear jump and shoot sections and then some single screen jump and shoot, but harder, like little kind of puzzle room sections. And then you get a boss fight and you get a magic weapon and then you go use that to stab other people. So this is the beginning of the formula, right? So like Mega Man 1 and now Mega Man 2, and it expanded on the formula, and we would see that formula continue for basically the entire series, depending on how you feel about that. And the reason I say I need to roll directly into my nostalgia experience is because when we were picking the game we were going to play, you said Mega Man 2, and I said Mega Man 4, and you said Mega Man 2, and I said, is Mega Man 2 the one that just has the slide or just has the charge shot? And you said, no, I think it has both. It doesn't have either.
No, and no, actually, if I remember correctly, I said I think it just has the charge shot. I didn't think it had the slide.
Okay, fair.
But yes,
yeah,
I did think it had this charge shot, but no, neither of them.
Yeah, actually neither. Which at first felt incredibly limiting, but then I very quickly settled into, okay, I have this very specific, very fixed tool set, and like that's the way you approach the world, right? You know exactly what your tools are, and you don't have 15 different tools that you're combining to try and solve a problem. But that was like my first 30 seconds. I went directly into a level and was like, can I charge my blaster? Nope. Can I slide? Nope. Okay. So that's the one Mega Man 2 is.
Yes. No, absolutely. So my nostalgia experience for this was that this is one that I played. The whole Mega Man series, like I played with my elementary school best friend, so our dads knew each other. And so I would go, whenever we would all hang out, we would just go into the room and just play Mega Man. That's what we did. And it's so funny because and again, it may have just been where I came into it with, but I was just like, all right, man, let's do this because I know this game is really hard. Not that hard, but I remember it as a kid being super hard, and it makes me think of like I play video games now with Teddy, and I'll be like, play Castlevania, and he'll get like 20 seconds into it and die, and then I'll clear the level, one shot it, right? I'm like, oh, so I guess when you do something for 30 years, you do get a little bit better at it. So, but yeah, that's my nostalgia experience is playing it with him.
Did you, were you and your elementary school best friend, did you have like a Mega Man that was your Mega Man, or was it just all the classic Mega Mans? Because I remember when we did Mega Man 6 that you had very fond memories of that one.
I did. I think all of the, like, playing Mega Man was our thing. It was just like, Dragon Ball Z was our thing when we first started hanging out, so it was kind of all of the Mega Mans. But I remember, because when did Mega Man 6 come out?
Ooh, that would have been fairly late.
Right?
Because Mega Man 7 was on the Super Nintendo.
Right, yeah. So Mega Man 6 release date, 93.
Okay, yeah, so this, 5 years. So they basically did one a year.
Right. So it was released in 1993, which I looked up at light speed due to editing reasons.
Now it's so tempting to leave the pause in. I won't. No, dead air is the death of a podcast.
Make me look amazing. So 93, yeah. So then I would have been 8-ish, 8, 9, somewhere in there. So I remember Mega Man 6, I think, particularly fondly is because we played tons of Mega Mans together, but I think that Mega Man 6 came out while we had already established the we play Mega Man together. So that was like also the, oh my gosh, this thing's coming out, and what? Rush? You can wear Rush? Oh my god, that's amazing. What? We have reached the pinnacle of video games. No other video games will ever video game as hard as this video game,
Yeah, no, you bought your first house together, right? Like,
yeah.
You started dating, but you lived in separate apartments, and then you got a house together, and you're like, oh, this is our Mega Man.
Yep. Yeah. So that was the one where I just remember being like, oh man, you can be like the power one and be this, and which has actually surprised me because I was like, this is a completely new formula, man. Like nobody has ever thought about this before. And so then when you get like item 1, item 2, and item 3, and this one, I was like, they did think about this before.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. I also noticed that just only the Heat Man weapon, Heat Atomic Fire, I think it's called, as like an oddly threatening name. You can charge that one. It's like, oh, okay, so they were way back in 1988. They were already thinking about that kind of stuff. And that's why I say like the formula was not, it was born in the first one, but it was solidified, right? Two points to make a line kind of thing. We should
Absolutely.
chill.
We should chill.
So if you want to hear more about Mega Mans, you should subscribe to the show. If you haven't listened to the other Mega Man episodes, go listen to the other Mega Man episodes. If you have friends that are also your elementary school best friends and they're into Mega Man, give them a direct link to that Mega Man episode, because then that's a great way for you to reconnect after you haven't seen them since elementary school. I think that sounds very sweet, and I would love to be a part of your special moment. It's better than ratings and reviews, but ratings and reviews are also nice, so you can leave those too. Links for our socials and our Discord and all of the crap is in the show notes, but we have our fun short URL now because we're trendy and cool. Do you remember what it is, George?
It's nogog.show.
Hey! Yahtzee! NOGOG.show.
Years.
Good job. If you want to go above and beyond and support us on Patreon, you can get the after show. The after show is just more show, often D&D related, actually, but just more of this. And you can get that for as little as $1. But if you support us at the higher levels, you can get your name shouted out on the show. So I first need to thank our 4-bit portables, David, Jacob, Josh, and Keith, our 8-bit classics, Yarno, Jason, John, and Kevin, and our 16-bit hero, Michael.
And if you support us at the $1,000 tier, we will build you a video game grotto in 6 hours based off of our skill level.
In what? What?
Yeah, so we'll build you an area that you can just use to play video games, but we're only going to spend 6 hours doing it, and we're only going to bring the skills that we already have to the table.
Cool. Okay, yes, this is... Are we also like paying for the materials and the travel and everything, or is that on top of the 1,000?
That's on top of the 1,000. Like our stuff is worth the $1,000.
I was afraid you lost us money for a second there.
No. I mean, well, to be fair, how about this? We'll pay for the shipping, and we'll pay, or like if it's like a mobile thing, or we'll pay to fly out, and we'll pay for the materials. But then we're buying the materials.
So now your video game grotto is made out of cardboard and paper mache.
Right? Yeah. We're just gonna fly out there, go to a U-Haul place, and say like, all right, we need 5 larges and 4 smalls. To be fair, though, honestly, building it through any other media, I out of all the media we could work with, I think I work best in cardboard, given that I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old at home. I've gotten pretty good at building cardboard spaceships, man. They have to be dismantled now. They don't just fall apart. Like they stand the test of time.
Yeah. That's another level, right? Is like we have to disassemble this thing to reclaim the parts, not we have found the wreckage strewn about the field.
Yeah, once or twice a year, they'll be like, "Hey, let's build a spaceship." And the last one, I remember, one of the cool things that you can do. This is a fun trick. Is that when you want to get two pieces stuck together, jokers use tape. Man, you could use duct tape, right? Duct tape falls apart. So what you do is you put 2 holes in it, and then you get a pipe cleaner, which we have thousands of, and then you push the pipe cleaner through, and you wrench it together. Then you put tape on top of it, and that's what binds that together forever.
Yeah, well, which is important, right? Because the pipe cleaner is there for structural integrity, and the tape is there to keep the vacuum of space out, right? So
exactly,
they serve different purposes. And yes, you can use the tape for both, but that's not the right tool for the job.
It's not what it's rated for. Yeah. You know? So yes, that's what we'll do for you for $1,000. Pay us money.
All right, let's talk about the audio visuals for Mega Man 2, which you could almost probably drop in the entire audiovisual section from Mega Man 6 in here, and if we ever do Mega Man 1, 3, 4, or 5, because these games all basically run on the same engine. And I say basically because I think what actually changed was the hardware, right? So like you could shove more and more guts into a Nintendo cartridge. So the Mega Man 6 cartridge had onboard processing power that a Mega Man 2 cartridge didn't have, which is why Mega Man 2 is just loaded with flicker. So like the biggest difference between 1 and 6 is the hardware that made the graphics render nicely. The actual trajectory of the artwork is pretty smooth, right? Like 1 looked good, 2 looks better, 3 had more detail, right? And 4 had more detail, and 5 and 6, but they are all obviously still built using the same, probably the same literal engine, but definitely the same like aesthetic style. And it looks great. Like this kind of classic, like little chunky Mega Boy and his, like 4 colors. Just, I love it so much.
Absolutely. The only one where you couldn't get any more guts into would be Mega Man 1.
Yes, because that had the maximum amount of guts, man.
It did. Yeah. Well done. So all this is true. But yeah, no, I mean, like you said, all the games look very similar, but they look good. So it's like why, they hit it at Mega Man, 1 or at least Mega Man 2, and then they said, okay, we're just gonna keep doing this, and then I believe that, we can talk about this during gameplay. The worlds got a little bit bigger and more expansive and longer. Like you said, they could put more stuff on the screen. I thought that they were particularly judicious because, whenever you're in Wily's castle and they have those big baddies, back of the screen's black because
because the bad guy is actually background and only the part you interact with is the sprite. Yeah, that's literally why that is not an aesthetic choice. It's because the giant baddie is being rendered on the background layer, and then the part you can interact with is rendered on the sprite layer.
Huh, fun. Good to know. But yeah, so I mean, like that type of stuff, where they made some judicious choices, and also too, like, good on them for being able to find so many different like color palettes for Mega Man, because it's like, okay, light pink, dark pink, very dark pink, red, So I mean, they did a good job on the spectrum of that. And yeah, sometimes you get the drop in frame rate, and the flicker. But I mean, honestly, I only experienced it maybe a handful of times in this playthrough. So
yeah, and I feel like the flicker happens for a while before it actually starts to slow the game down, right? Because when we played Mega Man X, the armor armadillo, when you're on the little minecart thing, like the game slows to a crawl. Like it is. I have played ROM hacked versions of that level that don't have the slowdown, and your muscle memory is like, I don't know how to do this part at full speed. Like I'm used to doing it. I've learned to do it at like quarter speed.
To be fair, though, not to gild the lily, but like I think that kind of works because it's like everything's exploding in slow motion and you're totally like flying out, so it never really bothered me because it's like that whole thing's exploding in slow motion and I'm not looking back, so it again, not to give them credit where credit's not due, but it was working for me, you know?
Yeah. And I think the fact that it was somewhat consistent because the enemies spawn in the same place and the minecart is basically moving at a fixed speed, right? So more or less every time you went through that segment, it basically slowed down in the same way. And the consistency in an action game is what you care about, right? So in Mega Man 2, there, like when you're fighting the dragon in Wily's castle, like the flicker goes pretty bananas there, right? The big guts tank, the flicker goes pretty bananas, but you can always see what you need to see to function, and the frame rate actually stays pretty consistent, right? So does it look perfect? No, it doesn't. It actually looks kind of terrible. But if you're the one with your hands on the controller, you don't notice it as much because it's not impacting your experience as much, right? If the thing you were trying to shoot became invisible and you had no idea where it was on the screen, that would be a problem. Or if you were trying to time like tricky jumps, but the frame rate was going up and down and up and down, and so you kept falling because your movement through space was unpredictable, that would be experience ruining. But it's not. It's just kind of blinky.
Yeah. No, I agree. And also too, like this definitely kind of falls into the area of time of, you know, like projecting, you know? So like, you know, back when you play original Legend of Zelda, right? Which, by the way, I spoke to somebody recently and they were like, oh my God, I'm a huge Zelda fan. Played Breath of the Wild, played Ocarina of Time, and that's it though. And I was like, you're missing some big uns there.
You know? You got a few gaps in your exposure. Yeah.
And they're like, oh, but I love Breath of the Wild. I'm like, if you like Breath of the Wild, you might try the other games, you know, like they're pretty good. But anyways, for you know, Legend of Zelda, The Legend of Zelda, you know, like they had those little tokenized baddies, but you know, you were like, oh yeah, the like that's this big monster, you know. So I mean, the same thing with the dragon is that even when it was still like flickering out, you know, again, rewatching it, which is what the show's about, right? The dragon looks kind of like a dinky dragon, you know. It also looks, in my opinion, kind of like what we thought dinosaurs used to look like back in, you know,
the Jurassic Park era of dinosaurs.
Yeah, where it's just but also like the, you know, dinosaurs were more like the Far Side era of dinosaurs, where they're all like, you know, like big and plotty, right?
Yeah.
But I say all that to say that that's not what it was like in my head when I was telling people about it later on the playground, you know. So they had a little bit of ways to get away with that because they were on the far left side of the uncanny valley, you know. So it wasn't until, you know, we started to get to you know, Super Mario and the low poly 3D where you were like, this just looks bad.
What's wrong with this penguin? I do think I want to give a specific shout out to the backgrounds in the levels, because the foreground, like the part you have to interact with, all looks good and there's a lot of variety and it's all themed really clearly because the early Mega Man had not yet run out of ideas. So like there's still a kind of logical consistency to, oh, this Robot Master has this power, which makes sense, and then lives in an area that looks like his power, right? So it's like Metal Man stage has like a very factory, you know, gears and like machines kind of feel to it. And that was the stage where in particular I noticed it's like you could take the background to this stage and put it into Shovel Knight literally wholesale. And I don't think that is bad at all, right? I think that means two things. One, this design works incredibly well because it's really clear what's in the back and what's in the front, but there's all this motion in the back and it feels like the world is alive and interesting. And also, Shovel Knight nailed the aesthetic they were going for, right? So, like, they were like, yeah, we want it to feel like that kind of, you know, NES era, like Capcom-y sort of thing, and it totally does. I actually have a screenshot up of it right now, and it's just like, God, it's even a similar color to the background of some of the Shovel Knight stages. Like, it just feels so good to have something back there. Because in the big boss arenas where you're fighting, you know, the Guts tank or the dragon or whatever, like, they made the aesthetic choice they made for technological reasons, but it also creates this super focused contrast of Mega Man versus this one giant terrifying robot. Whereas in the levels, when you're platforming, it's you versus the stage. So you want the stage to be the focus and having it feel three-dimensional, right? Where there is a background and a foreground, I think makes it feel like you're actually in a space as opposed to moving through just like a black nothingness, because when you're fighting the dragon, all of your focus is on the colorful dragon, so it doesn't feel like you're in a black nothingness because you're not paying any attention to the void.
Right. And actually your comparison to Shovel Knight will lead me nicely into the audio portion of audiovisual, which is that Teddy and myself and Lizzie, we all play this game sometimes at dinner called Guess the Music, where basically I've got a playlist of like 200 different songs, right? And we just put it on shuffle and they have to guess what it's from, which is weird because now they are able to place music that from games they haven't played, know, because they've just memorized it.
To them, it's music from this game we play with Dad.
Yeah, exactly, right? Which is fine and fun. But they'll sometimes say, like, have I played this video game? Do I know this one? Like that type of stuff. Anyways, I say all that to say, at one point, I'm looking at it and it says, and Teddy's like, "Oh, this is Mega Man." I was like, "No." He goes, "Pretty sure it's Mega Man." I'm like, "Sure, you're wrong. I'm staring at it." And he goes like, "What's it from?" I'm like, "It's from Shovel Knight,"
nice.
Which kind of says a lot of good things about Shovel Knight. Because I was like, "No, you're not going to get this one, buddy," because it sounds exactly like what it's supposed to sound like. So I say all that to say that, dude, the music in this, I mean, we were always going to gush about the music in this, but, I have literal playlists on my phone that is just the music from this,
Yeah.
And
I actually saw in the Wikipedia article, this is considered to be one of the most remixed soundtracks of all time.
And it's funny because there were a couple of stages that, I've heard remixes of where I was like, oh, all right, but I just wouldn't have been able to say, oh yeah, that's from Quickman stage, but by far, man, I mean, it just never gets old. When I was looking forward to it, I was excited about it the whole time because I've beaten all the 8, bosses, and I was like, it's time for Wily's Castle, and you know what that means? It's time for jams, and just like boost the thing way up. It's like do 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 do. I'm like, yeah. So yeah.
Two funny side-ons to Wily's Castle, because Wily's Castle is actually made up of 6 stages, I think, right?
Something like that, yeah.
So there's, I think, 3 distinct pieces of music for like the level part, and then there's the boss fights. But 2 things happened. One, when I did a couple streams of this, and when I got to Wily's Castle, somebody in chat was like, I know it's sacrilege, but I actually don't think this is that great of a piece of music. and I was just like, that's fine. Like, I'm not... when you're talking about, like, the absolute smorgasbord of Mega Man music, it's like, there's so many good things to pick from. It's not like this is the one gem among a bunch of garbage. So someone's like, I don't know, that one just never jived with me, but I love this piece from, Mega Man 4 or Mega Man X or whatever. It's like, yes, they're all good dogs, Brent. Like, that's... Yep. This is not worth getting into a flame war over.
And also, too, there's something about saying, I don't really care for this one versus, man, this piece of music sucks. Because if they had said that, I would have been like,
yeah,
you're wrong.
Now we're throwing
You're wrong, Brent.
The other thing is Wily, I think 4 and 5, maybe. I don't know. It's somewhere in the second half has, I think, one of the worst music tracks in the entire game, which is the one where it just is each line just it's the same line, but it's like up a half step. So it's like, ba, 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 and it just like slowly climbs until you feel like your heart is going to explode out of your chest. And then it drops back down and just repeats it. And it's borderline not music, in my opinion, because there's no discernible melody or anything. It's like, but it's not ambient noise, right? It's not like electronic noise. It is trying to be a song, and they just were tired and ran out of melodies. I don't know. It's the worst piece of music in the game, in my opinion, because not only is it not a particularly enjoyable piece of music, but it also creates tension that is too much for me. Like, most of the other songs are trying to like drive you forward and feel like sci-fi action-y because it's a sci-fi action-y game, right? But that piece, just because it plays out over 2 entire levels, it just feels like, when are we going to get to the fireworks factory? Like, and then you get there and it's fine because then it goes to the boss music, but it's too much time to have that much like musical tension that just never resolves. It is the one that there's 20 pieces of music or 15 pieces of music and 14 of them are great, and that one is terrible in my opinion.
What I think the hell would be that I go to a band concert and I keep waiting for the bass to drop, but the bass never drops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, he was describing this game.
Well, and to be fair, though, I think that just kind of shows that the makers of this game are actually Taoists, right? Because in order to have good, you have to have evil, right? So they were like, no one will really love all of this music unless we create one piece of bad music that everybody can say, yes, okay, that's what bad music sounds like. So look at all of this great music. They just forgot that music exists outside of Mega Man, you know?
No, all of your music can be good because we have a whole universe of crappy music to compare it to.
No, we need to create the complete experience, you know? Or there were some executives sometimes at one point said, like, man, all of these songs are banging. We got to have a bad one, guys, you know?
Otherwise, they're going to think we cheated.
But yeah, you have anything else for audiovisual?
The last thing I'll say, just because I think it's an interesting kind of like frame for it, is this music is so iconic that if you ask someone who knows classic video games, hey, what does Mega Man music sound like? You probably get Wily's Castle, right? Or you might get like Quickman or Crashman because they have like kind of good little tune skis. But I think that is a singular data point that paints a really clear picture. Whereas if you just say like, hey, hum a piece of music from Mega Man, that you get a song from this game, right? You would be highly likely to get a song from Mega Man 2. So it's a good heuristic for like, well, but how enduring and popular was that music really? And it's like, well, I don't know, 30 years later, I can still hum it.
If you just quoted them, da-na-da-na-na, da-na-da-na-na, da-na-da, they'd be like, I know that. What's that from? You know, like even if they rarely have ever played video games, what is that? And you're like, yeah, you've heard that, you know, in the same way where it's just like do 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 do, you know, like that type of music, you know. To be fair, when you're paired in the same breath with Mario music, it's pretty iconic. So I have one other thing, and I don't know where to put it, so I'm going to put it here. This game has very, very, very little dialogue. In that it has no dialogue, but it has very little text, which is great because it means like you can hand it off to a 5-year-old, to a 3-year-old, whatever, and they can play it, right? That being said, even with the kind of bad, you know, like
yeah.
And it's just such a weird thing to gripe about, but it's like equipped with Crash Bomber, and it's like, do you mean like you've equipped, or I don't know, and especially I forget exactly what it was. I should have written it down verbatim, but when Dr. Light gives you, first of all, item 1, item 2, and item 3, can we
not
just
great
call
names.
them something? Yeah, like anything, you know, like even if it's just Buster 1, Buster 2, Buster 3, Weapon 1, you know, anything, just not item 1. It's like, all right. And it's like, you know, something's been complete. I just remember reading that and being like, this is a little word salady. So again, if you're going to spend money, if you're going to cut budget anywhere, cut it on a localization where they say, you know, 5 things. But yeah, I feel like if they had the same team do this would be an all your base situation if there was more to translate, you know?
Yeah, it's I wonder if one of those things is the direct cause of the other. Like, this game does not have a tremendous amount of text in it, so we can kind of take it easy on the localization budget because that is an incredibly expensive and time-intensive thing, and we could put near gibberish and the game would still pretty much be playable, right? Like,
right.
It would be annoying if you had to decode literal gibberish, but you would only have to do it once, right? Which you kind of have to do anyway, because when you open the pause menu to get to where your items are, it's just a letter, and it's like, I think, is it always the first letter of the Robot Master's name? So like
maybe
Q for Quickman, because the weapons have their own names, but I think in your menu, it's actually the first letter of their name. Because like,
I would not be able to verify that, but that feels right.
Well, so the two things I'm going off of are Quickman's weapon. I don't think is called Quick Boomerang. I think it's called like Boomerang Shot or something. And Bubbleman's weapon is called Lead Bubble. And in the menu, he is definitely a B for Bubbleman, not an L for Lead Bubble. So like, there's but you just have to memorize that, right? And it could be an arbitrary garbage symbol, or it could be kanji that I don't know how to read. Like, it could be anything, and I would still have to memorize it because a single letter, I still have to memorize what that single letter represents. So I don't think in its time we give it a pass. Handing it off to someone today, I think that is one thing that feels incredibly unrecognizable, is like, hey, they can only fit like so many characters on the screen, and also the person translating this was not a native English speaker, so just memorize it, right? That would be unthinkable for a modern game.
Oh yeah, no, and yeah, it's funny because I remember when I was younger, I played a Dragon Ball Z like card-based RPG kind of game.
Oh yeah, I remember that one
for the PC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it was all in Japanese because they never brought it over to America. But I mean, I just learned what all of the symbols meant. Like, this one means fly, this one means attack, this one means run. You know, and this game, I feel like if it wasn't translated at all, it would only be like 1% less playable. You know, because you'd be like, well, you know, it's just Dr. Light appears on screen and says something, but you know, then I get this item 2. Okay, well, whatever, you know, and I was able to find it. It's item 2 completed. Get your weapons ready. It's like, but you're giving me I don't know what's going on. Anyways, so like I said, it was just, I don't know. I got kind of a kick out of it, but yeah, I was like, that's not great. But again, it even if it was in kanji, it'd be a 1% less playable, you know?
Yeah, localization and Flickr are the one way you could immediately say, this is Mega Man 2, not, was it 9, I think, was done in this style, right? Like, so 9 looks exactly like this, but you could tell just from the absence of Flickr and the presence of good localization, like, this is a modern one.
This is, and maybe they could have done, like, there was probably handful of other things that they did where you could have been like, oh, that's got parallax scrolling or whatever. But yes, so that's all I got for audiovisual gameplay.
It's a jump and shoot game. So if you've played any Mega Man, they all kind of play the same. But there are some things about this one that I actually really liked, and then lamented the trajectory that like the formula that they set in place, because you can see in hindsight, like, oh, this is where they had levers to pull, right? So one of the first things that jumped out to me was these levels are short, and they have a single checkpoint in the middle, and that's it. That's the whole ball game, right? And I actually really liked that. I was like, these are super short, super snackable levels. They don't wring every drop of blood out of an idea. They say, here's an idea, here's us playing with that idea a little bit. Now here's a robot master. Now you're done. Get out of here. And I could imagine why someone would say, like, oh, but I want more. But we have seen what happens when they take that too far, and it gets bad. It gets Mega Man X3 bad, right? Like, it just, here's more level. There's so much more space to explore. And it's like, this is too much space, because now you didn't have enough energy or time to polish the more space to the same level as when there was less space. So the way these levels are essentially designed is you have some linear sections that are like scrolling, right? So like as you move to the edge of the screen, the screen scrolls with you. But in between those are fixed screen sections that are almost more like an arcade game, where you have all the information available to you. You need to get from here to there. There's a moving platform, or there's a disappearing platform, or there's some enemies, or there's whatever. And you have to negotiate that to get off of the screen. And then once you're off the screen, you're done. You're done with that puzzle, right? With a few exceptions where like you can fall down and you fall back to that previous puzzle screen. But generally, like once you're off the puzzle screen, you're off of it. And I kind of like that. Like, so many games are trying so hard to be giant, massive experiences so they can get all your time and all your money and all your mental space. And it was really nice that the first day I sat down to play this, I just beat it in one sitting. And I was like, oh, and now I'm going to beat it 2 or 3 more times before we record. And that's just nice.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's you know, like, it's like a fine dessert, you know, maybe what you had, you wanted more, but you had was delicious, or you could just be pig and eat it all. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that so, so many games, more games should fall into the category of Mega Man 2, and fewer into the category of No Man's Sky. You know,
yes.
Like, yeah, look at all of this game we made, and it's like, yeah, all of that surging power and fury makes me wonder why I should give a, you know, like, it's like, yeah, you know, you created a lot of stuff. Is any of it good or worth witnessing. Or as a Peridot once said when she first saw YouTube and a cat on it, why was this documented? But but yeah, so no, I agree completely. I think that, so like you said, Mega Man 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all pretty similar in visual, pretty similar in gameplay. So because of that, some of the differences I think kind of stand out. And in this one, not having the charge shot, like that, I was so sad at first, because that's the thing I loved about Mega Man. Man, was that charge shot. I would go jumping around the house as a kid, with an ace bandage wrapped around my forearm to be the Buster Cannon, and I would charge that at people and fire it, and they'd say, "What is wrong with that child?" And I'd run away.
Because Mega Man doesn't talk.
Yeah, because Mega Man runs away from cool explosions in slow motion. I say all that to say that I was bummed. I was like, oh man, this one doesn't have the charge shot. But then I actually kind of enjoyed it more, because there was one way to interact with bad guys, which was either through the weapons or through just a normal shot, right? So often in the later Mega Mans, one, you're going to give your hand a cramp from just holding down the B button forever, which was not great, and not great affordances or whatever, right? But also, like you're always kind of wondering when you would hit a bad guy do they want me to use the charge shot for this, or do they want me to just hammer at it? And I'm sure the developer would be like, either one. It's like, yeah, but which one's the optimal solution? Because like a shot is worth 1 point, a minor charge is worth 3 points, and a mega charge is worth like 5 points, right? But, so what if it has 6 hit points? Well, if I do a full charge twice, like, that's not right, so just the simplicity of I'm going to shoot at this thing as fast as I can until it dies, I thought was really cool. And the fact that you can only shoot in 3 pellet bursts until one of the pellets is gone, which I'm not sure if they made that decision because that was like, it would start to get screen flicker if it was too much, but it's awesome because that gives you a great risk to reward, because if you really want to hammer a dude, you get up in their grill and you shoot them as fast as possible, but that'll dispatch them faster, but it's more dangerous.
Yeah.
So the fact that they basically did glory kills before Doom 2016, I think is impressive.
Yeah, that's a dark layer to apply to Mega Man, but I mean, conceptually, yes, there is a lot of push-pull similarities there.
I would absolutely play Doom 2016 modded to make it look like you've got like the I mean, you wouldn't even have to work that hard, man, because they've already got the Gauss cannon and all that kind of stuff, Yeah,
no, I would be shocked if this does not already exist, because the lift is pretty light.
Oh man, sorry, you were saying.
No, that was more important. Seriously, because now I want to go play that game.
Yeah,
anyway,
I just want to see Mega Man with his blue hand, like doing like one of the glory kills where he's like ripping the end's head off.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. The other side of not having the charge shot and having your more powerful weapons all have limited ammo is a lot of enemies are one-hit kills. And I haven't stress tested this, but I'm pretty confident that this would hold true for Mega Man 2 at least, is as you're going through a level, there are one-hit kill enemies that are there to make the platforming harder. And there are multi-hit enemies that usually are not involved with difficult platforming, but they are harder to kill, and they will kill the crap out of you if you try to not fight them, right? So some enemies have like a fixed movement pattern where they come towards you, but they're slow, and you can just kind of like ignore them if you want to, or you can just like boom and done, one lemon and you're out. But the bigger enemies that hit harder usually will follow you almost relentlessly and can follow you fast enough that just fleeing from them usually is not a great option. So unless they're on like a single screen and then you're just like, I climb down the ladder and run away. But I like that it creates a clear distinction between I fire regular lemons when I'm just trying to like deal with this platforming challenge, or I have to stand there and hammer them and do the glory kill if I'm trying to dispatch with this more powerful enemy, because otherwise they will kill me. Like fleeing just isn't really an option. And the enemy design and their placement in the levels locks together in a really cohesive way. Whereas what you're saying, they lost that cohesion later with the charge shot because some of those throwaway enemies, part of the expectation is, oh, they're one shot, but they're one charge shot. So make sure as you're doing this platforming challenge, now you're not just jumping and shooting. You have to jump, charge, shoot, jump, charge, shoot, right? So like you have this like one additional wrinkle, but then they added multiple layers to the charge shot. So now it's a weird rhythm of like, charge for one, shoot, charge double, shoot, jump, charge for one, shoot, right? And it gets more complicated faster than I think it gets more satisfying, right? Like going through, like in Wily's Castle, there's those areas that have like the moving platform and there's some obstructions. So sometimes you can just stand on the platform. Sometimes you have to jump on and off the platform. And there's enemies that are coming in from the side of the screen and they're endlessly spawning enemies. So sometimes dealing with them is actually worse than not, because if they're on the opposite side of the screen from where they spawn, then killing them way over there might actually make them appear again right next to you, which is a bigger problem. And so you have a clear set of boundaries and tools. And then optionally, you can throw all that in the garbage and use the special weapons, right? So like there's a very clear challenge that you are perfectly equipped to deal with by being jump and shoot man, or you can turn it down to easy mode by using the special weapons if you know you're not going to need that special weapon later, which is then part of that risk reward trade-off, but it's easy to understand, right? And I think I could easily imagine someone saying like, oh, but it's so simplistic and like, why would you play this game 100 times? And it's like, because it's simple, because it's enjoyable, and simple things can be enjoyable.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that I was talking to Megan, and she said a thing, and I said that kind of warrants discussion. So this is going to be, since we, if you want to hear more about our thoughts of Mega Man 2, go back and listen to the Mega Man 6 podcast. So, I say all that to say, and there's one of our fans on record. We have them on record saying that they like tangents, but this does relate. So is what Megan said was, she said, so, because I was talking about Mega Man and the charge shot, and she said, so like Samus, right? And I said, yeah. And she's like, is that at all like Mega Man, like Metroid? Is that at all like Mega Man? And I was like, well, that's a big question, right? Like, and it kind of goes to video games in general and how we classify them, right? And I said, they are both arguably platformers, and both of them you dispatch enemies primarily by shooting them. That's kind of where the similarities end, And I said, Metroid typically falls into the category of Metroidvania, and they've got like their own thing. So, and I said like, so with Metroidvania, the whole point is that, you have kind of a hub that you leave, go get new stuff, come back to it, and then you can explore new stuff and but you keep coming back to the hub. I said, Mega Man doesn't do that, except that it does a little bit, where I was like, yeah, because you go and you get, whatever Crash Man's weapon, right? And then the explodey thing, and then now you can go back to the other levels and get more stuff because, you can explode the walls, right? And I was like, I think that the key difference between Mega Man and a Metroidvania is that it's not required that you do that, but it is absolutely optional for you to backtrack and replay and do all of that. So I thought that was kind of fascinating, and why video games are so painful when somebody says, well, I like Metroidvania, or I like Metroid. What game should I play? It's like, dude, I got to know so much more information. What do you like about it? It's like, well, I really like the jumping and shooting. It's like jumping and shooting.
Oh, well, then I got a thing.
I got a thing for you. And it's like, I really like, the kind of the backtracking and the unfolding world. It's like, oh, well, then you might like Hollow Knight, which has jumping, no shooting, So anyways, but I thought that was kind of interesting that Mega Man does have some Metroidvania qualities.
Yeah, and so I think you're right. I think there are a few key differences in Mega Man 2 specifically that would, I think for a lot of people, put it to this isn't similar enough side, right? So in Mega Man 2, unless I was just straight up doing something wrong, you cannot go back to a level of a Robot Master you've already defeated.
Yeah.
So what that means is if you're in a level, like I think Flashman's stage has the walls that can be broken with the crash bombs. So your cycle time is now like basically the entire game, right? Or you have to restart and say, okay, I need to go do Crashman stage first so that when I get to Flashman stage, I can use the crash bombs to blow up these walls and get like an extra E-tank or whatever. And that like for me, as someone who likes Metroidvanias, that to me would be a deal breaker. It's like, that's not what a Metroidvania is. Like, I need to encounter an obstacle and then remember in my thinky brain, oh, I need to come back here with crash bombs later. And Mega Man X does that, right? And I don't actually know, I'm not sure if that was where that was introduced, or if the classic Mega Man, if any of the classic Mega Mans let you re-enter stages for Robot Masters you've already defeated.
And I'm not sure.
Yeah, but Mega Man X like, definitely.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking of, is like Mega Man X is where you could go back to old stages. And when you said you can't go back and fight Robot Masters that you defeated, when you said that, I was like, you know what? I didn't try. You know? And so I was like, well,
to be fair, the game only does like 2 or 3 little times where it's like, oh, hey, if you had already defeated this Robot Master, you would have this ability to do this thing in this circumstance. Whereas Mega Man X is like, look at all this stuff you can't interact with, right? So like they are more obviously cribbing from that. How do we feed exploration? How do we get people to like want to go back and you know, recycle a level and have a reason to return? Whereas the classic Mega Man doesn't pull as hard on that same string, right? It still gives you the same, like, hey, look, there's a wall that is obviously different from the other walls, and you don't have to interact with it, but can you? And of course, if you finish the game, you ultimately have to, because you have to blow up certain walls to get through parts of Wily's castle. So eventually you will know that wall can be blown up with the crash bomb. And then maybe on your next playthrough of the game, you're like, oh, I'm going to go defeat Crashman first, so that when I go into Flashman stage, I have the crash bombs and I can see what it's like to go through, right? So it's the tiniest little conceptual similarity without the huge rewards, but also without the gigantic punishments. Because in a Metroidvania, you can get locked into, I cannot progress, whereas in Mega Man 2, and I strongly suspect all the Mega Man classics, it's just like, here is a reason to play the game and defeat the Robot Masters in a different order. Because if you were going through, and I don't actually have the order memorized, but like, let's say when you go through in the optimal order, you don't have the crash bombs when you get to Flashman stage. So now you have a reason to play through in a less optimal order, which I actually have thoughts about the optimal order. But like, that's, I like that implementation, because it's, here is some of the enjoyment of exploration and going through the same area multiple times without the crippling penalty of I cannot progress and now the game has come to a grinding halt.
Right. That you know, I would not call Mega Man 2 by means. Like, you could definitely, like, you know, say, you know, Mega Man X, you know, it's a Metroidvania, and here's why. And you could write a thesis on that. I would not say that Mega Man 2 is a Metroidvania, but it in the same way that, like, I wouldn't say that Portal is a first-person shooter. But when somebody points out to you, it's like, hey, this is why categorizing video games is garbage. Because if you say, you know, like, oh, well, a Metroidvania is where you go to different areas, get items that are then usable in other areas. You know, like, that you have to go back and play them in other areas. You're like, yeah, like, there's a hub, and then I go over here and I get an item, and then I use that item, I come back to the hub, and I go use that other item. If that's the definition, then, you know, Mega Man's also a Metroidvania. It's the same way where it's just kind of like the, you know, well, are, you know, humans and gorillas like the same? And it's just kind of like, well, either everyone's fish or no one is, you know, because if you just go from like where we broke on the taxonomic tree, right? It's like, you know, it's like, well, humans and this are the same. It's like, either everything's a fish or nothing is, you know. It's like, I don't know what to say. Like, beavers are fish.
We're all like, a kind of land fish.
So yeah, so I just think that it's kind of an interesting thought experiment. But you have
because I think
order.
The boss order, and what I mean by that is like getting a weapon specifically to use on the next boss, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't have the slide, you don't have the charge shot. The items that you get, item 1, 2, and 3, are for traversal, but they're only required for Wily's castle. You don't actually have to use them in any of the Robot Master stages, but you can, and it does help with like a couple of puzzles. But this game, and again, I got this from the Wikipedia article, so I don't feel bad about this. This game has normal and difficult like difficulty settings, right? So when you start the game, you can play it on normal, you can play it on difficult. I would argue that this game actually has 4 difficulty settings. It has normal, using the ideal weapon, normal using the Mega Buster, difficult using the ideal weapon, and then difficult using just the Mega Buster, because everything can be done with just the Mega Buster, except there is the very last boss, I think, the alien Wily.
Yep.
he is only vulnerable to the lead bubble for some insane reason, probably because it's the least efficient weapon to shoot a flying enemy with, so it makes it harder. But every other boss in the game, the Crash Bombs boss, also you have to use the Crash Bombs. So besides those two, you could use the Mega Buster to solve all your problems, right? But it would be way suboptimal. And when I say way suboptimal, on normal difficulty, using the correct weapon on most of the Robot Masters, some of them can be defeated in as little as 2 hits. And most of the special weapons have like fairly large areas of effect, right? So the difference between using the Mega Buster or the correct special weapon is 100% of the challenge. The one and only boss I can think of that using the correct special weapon on it doesn't render that boss completely trivial is Quickman, because the time stop flash time, whatever it's called, runs out faster than he runs out of health. But then you just throw a couple of metal blades at him and he dies, because the metal blade is like the ultimate tool that solves almost all of your problems. So like, even in that case, the primary weapon does most of the work, and then the secondary weapon like quickly does the remainder of the work. So I just, to me, this is not completely accidental, right? Oh, I'm sorry. The reason I said that research didn't count because it was in the Wikipedia article is that normal difficulty, the easier difficulty, that was added for the American release. In Japan, they just had one difficulty, and it's what the Americans would have considered the difficult difficulty.
Nice.
So that seems to happen a lot in this era because, I don't know, Japanese kids are better at video games, I guess, or they're more tolerant of hard video games. But I think the way there's kind of like secretly 4 difficulty settings is interesting, but I don't think the step function between them is an appropriate distance. Like, using the correct weapon is so laughably trivial that it's like, I'm not even thinking about it. Like, by the time I get to a Robot Master, all the challenge is gone because the level was the challenge. And if you are using the correct weapon, the Robot Master is just a thing you have to do before the level ends.
Yeah, no, actually, I remember with one of them, I forget which one, like I equipped the proper weapon. I hit him once, and I wasn't like looking at their life. I'm looking at them, right? So I hit him once and like ran at them, and then they shot at me, and I must have like hit the button like right as they were coming to me. But basically, is it felt like this 2 samurai like clashing, and then we both landed on the other side, and like you just see blood hitting the ground, but you don't know from who, kind of a thing. But yeah, no, that's one of the things that I have on here, which is the bosses are. This is the way I read it, was the bosses are way more vulnerable to their weapon than that in X. Because I remember in Mega Man X, you could absolutely. I normally would use the Mega Buster most of the time, right? But yeah, if you use the one that they're weak to, it did like double damage, which made it easier, but not trivial. This one, it deals like 5-fold the damage, So yeah, to your point, right, is that there's no real challenge there. And when I was playing this, Teddy and Lizzie were over my shoulder through most of it. So I'd get to the boss, and then they'd be like, "Okay, here's the boss. Oh, that was easy. Okay, here's the boss. Oh, that was easy." I'm like, "Yeah, it's pretty easy." To be fair, though, I think that particularly in this game, I kind of liked that because the levels sometimes could be very stressful, So, and especially for some of the levels, 2 of which I will rant about here in a minute, were difficult enough to the point where if I got to the last boss, I had 1 life left, And so if I had died at that and then got kicked back through the, fun house of horrors that I had to do to get there. So I liked the fact that when I got to the boss, I could sit reasonably confident that I was going to waste his butt,
Well, and part of the actual challenge is presumably the first time you don't know the boss order, right?
Right.
So if you were playing this in a vacuum and, not engaging with like the social aspect, not reading Nintendo Power, then the first time you get to a boss, you are doing the complicated calculus of like, okay, I only have these 2 weapons and neither of them seem to be doing that much more damage, which means it must be one of the other 5 weapons, right? So like I have to now go and figure that out and come back and try again. So you end up like your first pass of the game to get to an optimal order could be really long if you are brute forcing the weapon Robot Master matchup and you're doing it incorrectly, because it's not actually a true 1-to-1. Like there isn't a perfect mapping. Some
Yeah.
Some are relatively vulnerable to the Mega Buster to the point where that is actually a very viable way to defeat them compared to even how much more powerful the special weapon is. And I think 3 of them have Metal Blade as a vulnerability.
Yes.
And then they also have like another one that is even more powerful. So you could pass through the game and like maybe my ultimate order is different than your ultimate order, but they're both, functional and they both get the job done in a fairly efficient way. So if you were thinking of it from that lens, it's like, well, the bosses are easy coming in with that information, but
sure.
but I think that's the new game plus, essentially, right? It's like I now know exactly which bosses are vulnerable to which weapons, so the difficulty has fallen, but now the game it's a different thing. It's no longer like, oh god, this is so like nerve-wracking because I only have one Mega Man's and I have to like quickly test one shot of each weapon and compare them and see which one hopefully obviously does more damage, so then I can kill the boss before I get defeated. But instead it's just like, no, okay, it's this guy, it's Woodman. I'm gonna use the saw blade against him because he's a big log boy, and then we're done, he's dead.
Well, and also too, I would probably make the argument, especially at this time in history, because I don't know how Mega Man 1 really handled the rock paper scissors vulnerability chart,
it's Mega Man 1, there's only 6 Robot Masters and they are incredibly obvious. It's like, oh, the ice guy and the fire guy, I wonder how that shakes out, right? So like it's the same mechanic but even simpler.
Sure. But I would definitely make the argument that especially at this time in the history, that it might even be to the point where not everybody would have necessarily known that there are vulnerabilities to Robot Masters, So like not only would you need to do the calculus of who's vulnerable to what, but also make the leap of people are vulnerable to stuff in general, right? Because the equation wasn't fully established yet. And so I imagine that there's some kid somewhere who went to go fight Woodman and was like, oh, well, I've got the buzzsaw, so I'm going to use that because that's just kind of cool. And then it's like, oh my god, I just wrecked him, and that was like an Easter egg for them, So
well, and that immediately makes you go like, are other enemies weak against specific weapons?
Yeah, and then what are you doing? You're going back and playing the same game over and over and over again, which is what they want you to do. I will say that. I'm going to start off hyperbolic and I'm going to pull it back. Heatman and Quickman stages are unacceptable difficulty. All right, let's put this back.
Yeah.
So here was the problem: is I didn't remember this game very well, and I just luck of the draw, because I was like, I'm not gonna look up the Robot Master order. I'm just gonna play it, right? I just happened to start on Heatman stage. That was just the first one I picked, and I was getting real frustrated because I probably got game over about 3 times really fast, going through the.
Oh, that's Quickman.
No, that's.
Oh, you mean the disappearing blocks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They go. The other ones go. I can't believe you missed that.
I'm sorry.
Not angry. I'm just.
It's these headphones, but that was actually perfect.
But yeah, no. So yeah, Quickman's got its own thing, right? But yeah, for Heatman, I was just because the way that the boxes appear, they're like, okay, it's going to be on this rhythm. Now, for the part where you're over, the lava, it's not going to be on that rhythm no more. And occasionally, we're going to put a block directly above, like in your jump angle, to like hammer you down into the lava. And I played it, half a dozen times. I was like, okay, I'm done with this level. I might be done with this game. My fingers were twitching to text you like, nope. And so, but then I just picked a different, no, actually at that point I went and looked it up like, okay, what's the order? I played first. I'm like, oh, that was relaxing and fun. I was like, okay. And then it was like 3 Robot Masters in where they were like, go back to Heatman. And I was like, no, I'm going to go to Quickman because he gives me the thing that stops time. And I think that'll stop time on this, which actually wasn't what I ended up using. I ended up using, once I got item 2.
I was like,
yes. I was like, I'm with you now. Okay, I get it. Yeah, and it still wasn't easy. I still had to get there and then jump on the thing, because if you just do it from the beginning, you run out.
Yes. So I know this, and the whole world will know this, because when I was playing offline and I was like, oh, I just want to do like my initial play of the game and just like, I have some time, I want to play it right now. So I sat down and I got the boss order that I followed, because remember I said the boss order there is not one optimal order. There's actually 2 or 3 that are like basically even in optimality, but you don't get item 1, 2, and 3 after you have done X number of robot masters. You get them after specific robot masters. So if you do Heatman stage before you do this, whichever one gives you item 2, which is like the Rush Jet style, horizontally moving platform. So item 1 slowly goes up, item 2 shoots forward, and then item 3 climbs up along the wall, right? So that's what they do. So I got to Heatman stage before I got that, and I completely forgot that those items existed because I was just thinking Rush is not in this game, so I just don't have any equivalent of the Rush Jet. So I was like, okay, I guess I got to do this stupid block puzzle. And it took me probably 10 to 20 attempts. Like it took me a while, but I did it because I was just like, I'm going to do this goddamn puzzle because it's not that long. I can memorize it, right? And so it took me a while, but I did eventually get it. And I was like, oh man, it feels really good, because that is probably the most difficult platforming challenge in the game if you struggle at all to memorize when the rhythm breaks and when you have to jump up versus when you have to jump to the side stuff. So I nailed it, felt really good. And then on my subsequent playthrough, because I was like, right, item 2 exists. That is the alternate way to do this. So I was then playing on stream and I was like, okay, haha, I have item 2 because the order I did the Robot Masters. I'm going to just jump on this thing. Screw you, block puzzle. But I did it from the top of the platform, not from the edge of the lava. And as you just said, if you do it from the top of the platform, it does not last long enough to get you over the bottomless pit.
It does not.
So here I am, just like, I'm the greatest, I'm going to live forever, and then straight into a pit. Because I think you actually could make the jump if you time it right, but I didn't. But if you stand, there's like a little ledge that actually looks slightly different right at the edge of the lava. If you stand there, then it will take you all the way to the wall, and then it runs out and you're good. But I have a clip from the stream that I will put in the show notes of me being an incredibly pompous ass thinking I'm skipping out on this really difficult block puzzle and then falling in a pit.
But actually what happened to me was I did something similar, but to me the game said, like, yeah, thought you were hot, didn't you, champ? Try again. Because I was like going. I was like watching it go down. I was like, oh no. And I jumped to the area where there's the one up, you know?
Oh,
so
nice.
It was like they said, that one's on us. Try again.
Yeah, give it another shot.
Yeah. So then I just walked myself off the cliff, and Teddy said, why did you do that? I was like, I was stranded, man. There's what else was there to do? You know? So yeah, there's that. And then Quickman stage is very approachable if you have the flash weapon, and super not if you don't. I say that though to say that, you know, I was playing again with Teddy, and, you know, because they start with the boop lasers, right? Like early. And then Teddy actually said, hey Dad, do you think if you use the time stop thing, that would help? And I was like, yeah, man.
Yeah, I do think it'd help, buddy.
Yeah. So I started going through the puzzle though, and he was like, you know, for the first couple, you know, he was like, why aren't you using the thing? I was like, because I only have so much of it. So I'm going to wait till it gets to the hard part. And so I did it right at the beginning of the hard part. And then, you know, basically I could hear, you know, like and what music is that?
That is the pause music from Battletoads.
Yeah, it is. So yes. So I started, you know, going through the level. I'm like, yeah, I got this. And then this must have lasted for 1/10 of a second, but I was imprisoned in this moment for 1,000 years, you know, like it was the time shield being broken in Rick and Morty, right? It's because I landed and I saw, I'm running out of this stuff. And then there's the one area where you've got like the little pod that can give you more special. And like, I was like, do I have time to go get that? Or is the laser gonna get me? And just doing the mental calculus of, should I just gun it or should I go back for the thing? Again, 1/10 of a second, but in my mind, I was like deliberating over that for an eon, and I chose poorly. I went for the extra pod, and I did not get there fast enough, and I exploded. And that actually is another point of the game, which I think is kind of like only at continues do they refresh all of your cannons. They do not at the end of lives, which makes things very much a bummer sometimes.
Bingo! That was exactly what I wanted to talk about. because this. So just a quick aside. The 1-up Mega Mans in the Heatman stage block puzzle, I think there's two ways you could potentially end up there. You use item 2 way too early, or you are going through the block puzzle, you see an extra life, you jump down there, and then realize you are stranded. Which is funny because then it's like, well, you have to kill yourself, but you didn't lose. You just lost like a minute, right? Like no big deal. So I do think that's kind of funny. They're sort of trolling you, but they do that other places where they're like, hey, this item is retrievable under the right circumstances. You can get that 1-up and then jump on item 2 and zoom over to the other side, but you have to have item 2 to do that, right? And you have to decide getting the 1-up is worth the risk of falling into the lava or falling in the pit. But your weapons only refill after a continue as opposed to after an individual death, I think is maybe one of the most enduring design choices in the Mega Man series, and I actually kind of super hate it because even up through Mega Man X3, right? We played we've now played 2, 6, X, X2, and X3, right?
Yes.
And all the way up through X3, all of those games only recharge your weapons after a continue, not after a death. And the problem that creates is you have one of two situations. You don't know what thing to use, so you experiment and then you figure it out, but by the time you figure it out, you now don't have enough of it to actually solve the problem. Or you were using your weapons throughout the stage, and now when you need them, you don't have them available, right? So that's like, I don't love that because it's like, hey, just memorize when you can and can't use these weapons. And I just don't love that as a design choice. And then the flip side is, or when you die, we will put you somewhere that has infinitely spawning enemies because every Mega Man game has infinitely spawning enemies. And hey, you can just stand here and grind back the items, which in Mega Man 2's defense, enemies drop large weapon recharge and large health pretty generously.
They do, yeah.
But I still think it is a needless padding of the time you have to invest in the game that feels like that is a subtle thing that if you ask someone, like, does this feel like an old game or a new game? They wouldn't necessarily be able to say, like, well, my weapons don't recharge after a death, and that means I have to invest a bunch of time in grinding weapon energy. But they would feel it. They would say, like, oh, the game is grindy or it's slow or something. And that mechanic would be contributing to it. I think the more macro problem that it or the more micro problem, that's the macro problem, is that it creates this like feeling of slowness. But the micro problem it creates is in Wily 4 or 5, the crash bombs boss where you have to blow up the walls and then there's the thing against the wall that you shoot with a crash bomb and it makes it blow up. There's like 6 of those things in the room and there's like 7 or 8 walls, but you can only fire 7 crash bombs. So you have to fight them in the correct order. There's like 2 or 3 orders that would solve the puzzle. But if you make a single mistake, you're done. You're done. Because then you die since they're only vulnerable to crash bombs. And then when you get tossed back out, I'm not positive that there's actually an enemy outside of that room that would allow you to recharge your weapon energy. So making a single mistake there, you know, firing a bomb at the wrong time or missing or something, like, okay, now I have to replay this entire level. I have to die 3 times until I continue. Then I have to replay the entire level, and then I will get another chance at solving this correctly. And that, generally, the game has a relatively short cycle time because the levels are short and the middle of the level and the boss room is a checkpoint. But in that one case, it's like, what if the cycle time was just 10 times longer than the cycle time is anywhere else in the game? It feels like an unintentional spike in difficulty. I don't think someone actually thought, we're going to make this boss have this specific weapon vulnerability, and we're going to make it a really tight margin of error between how many times you can fire this weapon and how many times you have to fire this weapon to defeat the boss. And then considering, well, what happens if they fail? And it's like, they're done. You got to press reset on the console and enter your password, because that's the only quick way to restart it, right? Because otherwise you have to die until you're out of lives and continue back to the start of the stage. So it's just like, I don't know, man. Just give my goddamn weapons back. Like, the challenge should be in figuring out what the right thing to do is and then executing it, not in then I have to go out into the wilderness and farm weapon energy, and then 10 years later my son will come back with a fully charged Mega Buster and avenge my failings, right? Like that just, I don't know. I hate it even in Mega Man X. Like, it's just an annoying thing to be like, all right, go farm weapon energy.
Yeah, go do the thing. Yeah, and I think that it's how many mistakes do you make before you get told to go get good, scrub, and so if it's like I made a mistake because I didn't really understand the amount of weapon energy I had to number of uses I needed, and it's like, cool, well, give me 20 more minutes of your life because you made a mistake. And it's like, I mean, kinda, I don't feel that was a proportionate response. So no, I agree. And yeah, I just think that, you die, you come back with all of your stuff, and then when you continue, you just get punted back to the beginning of the level with all of your stuff, so it's just, you lose your midpoint save. I think that's punishment enough, and follows your kind of philosophy of, okay, well, go back and try the whole thing again because you need to build skill. I have two other things. One is the bigger item is the passwords. Passwords are cool. I like passwords. I particularly like passwords in this game, day and age, and there's no way that passwords were done because, they knew that you might not play this through in one go, and they wanted to give you a way to parse it out without saving anything directly onto the file. Totally get that. But this is like the opposite of nostalgia goggles, where it's like, it's better now, which is that now, because of the internets, that means that your 4 difficulties now have infinite gradations in between them, because if you can do, level 4 difficulty for everything except Quick Man Stage, then just skip Quick Man Stage. Just don't play it. Go find the password, play up to Quick Man Stage, then go find the password that has everything you did, but with Quick Man beaten, and continue to play. So, like, you can literally just say, I don't want to do that to anything. And I'll tell you what, on Quick Man Stage, my finger was twitching. I was like, I don't have to do any of this. I don't have to do any of this. I could just go online. And this wouldn't be a part of my life, which again is in line with my philosophy of this game is here to bring me joy, and I don't want none of this. But I said, no, I'll do the right thing. I went through it properly. But so I think that's kind of cool going back. And again, like, it's a weird opposite nostalgia goggle where the game is better than you remember it because you have access to, you can a la carte any part of this game that you want. And that's kind of weird and kind of cool.
Well, and the password system is knowable. Like, it's not, oh, we will generate a random 64-digit hexadecimal code that will give you back what you have, but if you wanted to be somewhere else in the universe, you would have to do that and then get that random 64-digit hexadecimal code. The password grid, which I think continued all the way through the entire Mega Man X series, right? It's a 2D coordinate plane, numbers and letters, and then you pick the spots. And I think later it's you pick the spots and the picture that's in that spot, so they have like a third dimension of complexity to the password. But there is a definable algorithm behind that, going all the way back to Mega Man 2, because I don't think Mega Man 1 had passwords, but going all the way back to Mega Man 2 at least. So you could say, like, I want to have 3 E-Tanks and Quick Man defeated. And even if there is no circumstances under which you could actually arrive at that, and I'm pretty sure there is, but like, let's just say that was an impossible thing to arrive at, the password system will let you do that because all it's doing is writing to memory and just saying like, okay, this is the state of the universe. And like, That's a very cool thing to be able to say, like, I want to have item 2, Quick Man defeated, and 3 E-Tanks. And then I'm gonna go start with Heat Man because I have item 2 and I just don't want to deal with that stupid block puzzle. Like, that is a very cool borderline, like, in my memory, that feels very like Game Genie, where it's like, oh, I get to tell the game the state I want it to be in. But they just built the password system that way. And it may have been intentional. It may have been an accident of just like the implementation happens to afford you all that flexibility, but intentional or accidental, it's so good. It's so nice. It's clean. You could go to any, used game store anywhere on Earth and pick up a Mega Man 2 cartridge, and it is exactly like every other Mega Man 2 cartridge because you don't have to worry about the battery inside or if the memory is good for saving your file, like, because it's all passwords.
Yep. No, I 100% agreed. And yeah, it is just kind of weird to kind of say, to be able to a la carte a game that, I mean, again, it would be many, many moons later to where, games like The Last of Us 2 say, well, how hard do you want combat to be? How scarce do you want resources to be? How much do you like to really be able to like nuance in a nuanced fashion change the game? Whereas this one's just like, I don't know, tell us what you want to do. And then so to your point, right, is the buzzsaw is like the solution to all of life's problems, right? And you know what it made me, because the thing is that with Mega Man, it's jump and shoot game. And why is it jump and shoot? Because you only shoot at chest height, and it goes out, you can only shoot 3 pellets at a time, whereas the the buzzsaw goes up, down, left, right, every which way, which absolutely made me think of Castlevania 4's whip.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can left, right, and like, I say all that to say that it has the same effect on the game that Castlevania's whip, 4's whip had on Castlevania, which is it's like once you get it, the main difference though is that unlike the whip, there is an ammo component, right?
Except there's a small bug in the game, and if you fire 3 shots, pause and unpause, it doesn't count your shots.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
There's 2 or 3 weapons that just happen to be bugged that way, where like the variable that is keeping track of how many times have you fired now take away 1 block of weapon energy, like not one individual pip, but like whatever the unit that it takes away is, it gets wiped out when you pause. So
nice.
if you go like shot, pause, shot, pause, shot, you can do that indefinitely.
Well, then the more you know. But
right.
that being
said, so it's even more broken.
Yes. But being said, I when you said like the buzzsaw is the solution to all of life's problems, I'm like, yes, it is God's favorite. Like it is the way to go. But that's pretty much all I got. You got anything else?
There's other stuff I think we could pick apart. The one other thing I'll just throw a mention in, because it ended up becoming like a staple part of the formula, is this was the game E-Tanks were introduced in, and that is super clutch for certain, like there are certain bosses that are just like, they're hard, and it's just nice to have an E-Tank, right? Because it's a little bit more user-defined difficulty, right? So if I want to play on the hardest difficulty, only using the Mega Buster and never using an E-Tank, I can do that. But now look at all these delineations I have to get down to the easiest difficulty, where I always use the right weapon, I always use E-Tanks, and I always go in the perfect order, right? So like there's a lot, the E-Tanks add a little bit of additional, do I want this convenience or do I want to ignore it and say like, oh, I finally beat the entire Wily's castle without using a single E-Tank, right? And like, I never really thought about user-defined difficulty until we started doing Nostalgia Goggles. But now that it's a thing I notice, I always appreciate it. I always appreciate I get to make this decision, because sometimes I'm like, no, I just want to throw 2 saw blades at this logman and have him die near instantly. And then other times I'm like, nah, I'm feeling a challenge, right? And E-Tanks are a great, hey, buddy, like use them or don't, right? And it's just it's so good. And I'm glad they kept it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the difference between, hey, I want to destroy this demon, so I'm going to use the BFG 9000 versus like, no, combat shotgun all the way. That's all I'm using, which I hear you're coming around to.
I have, yeah. Well, I will have more updates as I continue to play the game, but the combat shotgun is jiving better with me this time than my first playthrough.
like just slowly but surely, there's the Church of the Combat Shotgun,
which I mean kind of fits the hell demon motif, right? So like instead of a crucifix, it's a combat shotgun. You're wearing a combat shotgun around your neck? Yes, I am in the Church of the Combat Shotgun.
Yes, praise be. So man, what do you think? Did it hold up?
Okay, so I'm struggling with this one a little bit, not because of any individual thing that is right or wrong with the game, but there are things that I am very aware that I am not maybe punishing as harshly as I might because of Nostalgia Goggles, right? So a great example of that is the screen flicker. It would be really hard to go to someone in the era of retina screens, 8K monsters where everything looks better than it does in real life with super HDR and everything, and be like, hey, here's a pixel art game. And it's like, oh, cool. Like, that's kind of retro throwback. Sometimes some of the pixels just won't be on the screen, though. And you'll just have to be okay with that. It's not going to affect the gameplay. You can still do everything you need to do and everything's fine. But, like, sometimes the art is gone, right? Like that just feels like, am I giving that more of a pass than that actually deserves, right? Like, is that retro in a way that someone who didn't live through that era would go, ugh, this game is broken? And it's like, only a little, yes, sort of, but just like a tiny bit. So I'm going to say no nostalgia goggles required, because you could make an argument that someone who didn't live through the 1950s still enjoys swing music and the way it sounds on vinyl, right? It's kind of scratchy. And this, I think, the argument I'm making feels more like that, right? Where the flicker is like listening to the scratchy sound of a needle on a vinyl record, because it doesn't negatively impact the experience. It doesn't positively impact the experience. It is just a specific kind of flavor from a specific era in time. And the reason I think I'm okay giving that a pass is because all of the mechanical things we talked about, those all do hold up. The difficulty feels like it's about in the right place, and you have a lot of wiggle room to make it easier or harder, within certain parameters. The snackability of it is right on a perfect line, where it's kind of like, if you're in a rush, there's enough here that you can just snack on it and feel okay about it. But if you want to sit down and really chew on it and really engage with some of the challenges, there's also enough depth where the game feels like it's interesting and worth engaging in, right? It's not only a 40-hour full meal, and it's not only a 2-bite snack experience. Like, it's like a peanut butter sandwich. Like, it can be a meal or it can be a snack, depending on kind of what your needs are at that moment. And I like the spot that kind of a game occupies, and we have sort of diverged from that, where most modern games are either gigantic or tiny and meant to be played a million billion times on a tiny loop. And this is a game you play 2 or 3 times, just like you replay Castlevania, right? You play this game, maybe once every 6 to 18 months, and you're just like, oh, it's fun. I like Mega Man 2. And that's just okay. So because the mechanical stuff holds up, I'm willing to give a little bit of a pass to the weird retro vinyl needle skipping thing. So I'm going to say no nostalgia goggles required.
So for me, this is way easier. No nostalgia goggles required. And here's why, though. It's because you make a very interesting point, and I'm gonna challenge it by going in the opposite direction. So you said like oh, well, if you look back at like scratchy vinyl and all that kind of stuff, I would jokingly and lovingly make the assertion that the premise that we don't ship broken games anymore is flawed.
that is totally true. That is totally true.
So I think that the screen flicker to me is more akin to, I don't know, I was in the middle of talking to this NPC and then they melted into the floor, but the game's still worth playing. I literally just recommended Cyberpunk 2077 to you with that caveat. Like, sometimes people glitch out of existence. But it's still fun. Like, it's still a lot of fun. The mechanics are good. The quests are good. It's a great game. It's just glitchy a little bit. I mean, some of my favorite stories are due to Bethesda's glitches. So this to me feels more like that, where it's just like, no, the game's not perfect. It does do some glitchy stuff, but the rest of the game absolutely, like, holds up. I really appreciate and agree with you on the snackability. It's enjoyable. You get to pick how hard that it is. If you say, you know what, I'm gonna put my lead boots on and I'm gonna go slug it out with this guy, then you can do that. If you say like, no, I want to put on my 3 attuned legendary items and go one shot this guy, like, you can do that too. So I mean, to me personally, it lives up to the hype. It is Mega Man.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day.